Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Dave Crenshaw Success Project. This is the show where I'm looking for universal principles to teach my children how to be successful, and you get to come along for the ride no matter what your age. And this episode is a special episode where occasionally I sit down with my children and we actually have a discussion about some principles of success. And these are usually something that's come up as I've had discussions with people. And I thought, man, we should talk about this because nobody talked to me about these things when I was younger. So I am here with my children right now in my home office. Say hello, children.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
Briefly introduce yourself.
I'm Stratton. I am 18 years old.
What is something interesting or something that you like, Stratton?
I like space. Space is cool.
Nice.
Space is cool.
Space.
Okay.
Space.
I'm Ella. I am 14.
You can't say space. I know you're interested in it, but you can't say it because Stratton will say it.
I just started swimming preseason.
Nice.
Nice.
Congrats. Way to work hard. Okay, Darcy.
I'm Darcy, and I'm 10, and I really think, tennis is cool.
Tennis is cool.
Tennis.
This is the first time I've heard this. This is very interesting. Okay. So today I wanted to talk to you about a very important principle of success. And it's something that if you can start thinking about it now when you're young, there might not be too much you can do, but you can start thinking about it and start being aware of it. And it's going to help you a lot later in your life. You probably may not even realize how important this conversation is at this moment. So my hope is that maybe you'll listen to it again later or it'll make an impression in your mind. So what I want to talk to you about is the concept of passive money. So you'll hear the phrase passive income, right? And the idea of passive income is you don't have to do any work and the money just comes in to you. And that's a nice concept. What I have learned through the years is that passive income is not the accurate terminology. I'm using it for this discussion because that's the term that everybody knows. And when they're looking for the podcast, they'll be more interested because they see it. But to me, there's no passive income. There's just varying degrees of maintenance. So there's low maintenance income. There's nothing that's truly no maintenance, but there's low maintenance income and there's high maintenance income. So the low maintenance would be considered passive. The high maintenance is considered active. So, for example, on the low to almost no maintenance income side of things is your Mel Torme, your royalties where you're getting this regular check from a Christmas song over and over. But they still have to give it some attention. They still have to maintain it by making sure that they're getting paid, by making sure that the company's doing the job in terms of collecting their royalties like they should. And then, of course, on the other side is extremely high maintenance income where you do a job at work, you get paid a check, and you're just trading hour for dollar over and over. Hours, dollars, back and forth. So there's a middle road of this in between high maintenance and low maintenance income, which would be something like investing in stocks, right? You can't just invest in stocks and then sit back and it'll take care of itself forever. Yes, there's certainly the idea of you buy it, you hold it, and it grows over time, but you still have to look at it. You still have to make sure, is this the time that we want to exit? Now, I can make that income. If I have to constantly check the stocks, honestly, that's a bad idea because that's just going to cause me stress and I don't know really what I'm looking for. So one of the ways that we make that lower maintenance income is we have a financial planner and we have a strategy with that financial planner. He knows what our risk level is. He knows what our goals are. So he monitors our stocks and other investments. And when he sees that it's the right time or the company that he's working with, their algorithms trigger something and say, this is probably a good time to exit, then he either does that on his own or he lets us know and we give him the go-ahead to do it. So we take something that might be middle of the road maintenance income and turn it into low maintenance, and we're paying him a percentage for that privilege, but it's worth it so that I can focus on the things that I do best, my most valuable activities. So passive means you're not having to give it much attention or much time, and the money is either flowing in, as in income, or it's flowing out, as in expenses. Most people don't talk about passive expenses. In fact, I looked for it on Google and I could not find anything, but it is it's just as important as passive income. And I'm also going to explain some things different than the way I've heard it. And this is just based on experience. So let's give it a shot. Let's just kind of try here. What would you guess is passive income? So money that comes in, but doesn't require much effort or attention for the money to come into your bank account, for example.
Examples of
Yeah,
or what
what-
it is.
Yeah, what would you
Mm,
guess
okay.
is an example of that?
When you put money in a bank, the bank pays you interest. Right?
Exactly.
Mm.
Yeah. Interest on money. And that amount goes up or down, right? Several years ago, the interest rates were so low that you weren't making much. You were making like 1% or less on it. At the moment, interest rates are higher. So now you can make around 4 to 5% on the money that you have in the bank. But that's a good example. The bank holds on to it. They use it for other purposes. And because they're using it for other purposes, they're giving you a percent of interest back. Okay. What are other examples of income that comes in that doesn't require much attention?
Like allowance or something.
Okay. Well, yeah, you could say that, but we do require you to, even with the allowance, we require you to help out around the house and have some jobs and stuff like that, right? So it's not like you can sit back and I'm going to give you that allowance for the rest of your life,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's a point at which that no longer happens. So
Yeah.
There was something you mentioned the other day. I can't remember what it was called. I remember like seeing it as I was scanning stuff.
okay. Was it royalties?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, let's talk about royalties, which is where most of my passive income comes right now. Royalties mean you create something, and then the company that owns it or facilitates it, they pay you money over time. So, for example, I have written several books, and when I've published those through companies, when someone buys it, the publisher pays me royalties. So I make a little bit, and it really is a little bit of money every time someone buys a book. My favorite example of low effort income, by the way, or low maintenance income, is Mel Torme and his estate. Do you know who Mel Torme is?
Maybe if I
person?
read the
Never
name.
heard of that.
person?
Right.
Maybe if I've
Good.
seen the name but
That's-
can't pronounce it.
Exactly. That's why I love it. Now, if I was asking that question in the 60s or 70s, someone would go, oh, well, Mel Torme is a singer, and he is also a songwriter, and he sings the standards, jazz songs. He was known for having a smooth voice. And he wrote a little song you may have heard of called The Christmas Song. Chestnuts roasting on an open fire, Jack Frost
right.
nipping at your nose. Yes, exactly. Don't sing too much because then we'll owe royalties on it. Okay. But the idea is that he wrote that song and it's so popular that people have remade it. And when a songwriter writes a song, if other people record it, they still owe the songwriter royalties. So Frank Sinatra sang it, or even like someone who's somebody that's more popular that's had a Christmas album. I know we listen to like Sia. I don't think she's done it. But if she did it, if she did the Christmas song, then she would owe royalties to Mel Torme's estate. Now it's his estate.
Because he's passed away.
Yeah, he passed away in 1999. But his estate still continues to make royalties off it. The last estimate that I saw was from the time that it was released, I believe in 1945, it's been $30 million in royalties. Mel Torme referred to the song as his annuity. And an annuity means an annual income that comes in that he doesn't have to do any work for anymore.
Hmm.
So that is an example of extremely low attention income. And so at the same time, I'm going to bring up passive income, and I'm using that because that's the term that everyone uses. I'm also going to say that I don't believe any income is truly passive.
Right.
Passive means I don't have to do anything for it,
I mean, you have to set it up, right?
right? And you have to make sure that you're getting paid. So even Mel Torme's estate has to check in with the royalty distribution company. I don't know if it's BMI or ASCAP. There are these governing bodies that make sure that people get paid their royalties. But they've got to follow up. They've got to make sure, are we getting paid? So yes, it's passive in quotation marks, but it still requires effort. So the question is, what kind of income requires the least amount of effort for it to come in? And I'm actually going to use a different word. We'll say attention. Which amount of income requires the least amount of attention? Let's go to the other side. What is the opposite of passive income? What is income that requires all of your attention in order for it to come
I
in?
feel like teaching. Like
Okay.
it takes up a lot of your time.
Manual labor, mowing
Oh.
lawns, stuff like that.
Right. Anything where you're getting paid for hourly work. So Stratton, right now, you're in customer service.
Right.
Do you make any income when you're not at the office doing customer service?
No.
No. So therefore, it is the opposite end. It is active income, and it requires all of your time, all of your effort, all of your attention to come in. Can you see how in the long run, that's not a great pathway toward financial success, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're going to be trading time for money for the rest of your life if you don't find a way to have passive income.
Right.
Now, let's talk about maybe something that's toward the middle. That might be something like real estate. Darcy, do you know what real estate is? You heard that term before?
Sort of.
Okay. Ella, do you know what real estate is?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what?
Isn't it like selling like
Things.
land and houses?
Yes, there you go. That's real estate. So if you own, let's say, and I was having a conversation the other day with somebody who facilitates buying houses and then renting those houses out on your behalf. They're property managers. So let's say that I buy a property far away from here. I buy it in Indiana and I own the house, and someone makes sure that renters come in and I get paid when those renters pay. That to me is, it would qualify as passive income, but it still requires some attention, right? If something goes wrong with the house, I have to follow up with it. But that's a great example of money that comes in without me having to continually look at it.
I would say an example of that we know personally is Grandpa's Lodge up in Wyoming, right?
Mm.
Like, isn't that why he set that up in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, that is an example of it. And that kind of brings up a different thing, which is owning a business.
Right.
Right. So if you, really, it's a business. He's got employees. They're doing all that stuff. And the idea is that income comes in while other people are running it. Now, I've worked with lots of entrepreneurs, and I would say that for many of the entrepreneurs, all it is active income. In fact, it can be sometimes more active income than if you were working as a job for someone else.
Right.
Because now you have to make sure that everything's getting done.
Right.
Unless you learn how to delegate and you hire other people to run the company. Right. So at the beginning, if you're a small business owner, that might require a lot of attention. But if it's super mature, let's go the furthest end of the spectrum, Jeff Bezos.
Right. He's not even running Amazon anymore.
Right. Low attention. He probably still has to check in, make sure that the CEO is doing things properly, or whoever's running it whenever that position changes. So it's lower effort because he's got how many thousands of people, 100,000 people, whatever it is, working for him at Amazon.
Right.
But the goal is to get to the point where you're not having to show up every day in order for checks to get deposited into your bank account.
Got you.
Make sense?
Yeah.
Let me give you an example of the first time I really heard passive income is an example that really isn't passive income. And that is occasionally, have you ever heard of a multi-level company? Anyone ever talked to you about that? Okay. Multi-level company, I'll just summarize it. And I know that I'm oversimplifying it, and my apologies to someone who is in a multi-level company and they think they're great. I'm not bashing on them. I'm just simplifying the concept. The idea is you are a distributor for, we just had a peppermint oil incident. So our cow smells like peppermint
Christmas.
right now. So I become a distributor for a company that sells peppermint oil. And the idea is, and I'm holding up my hands to the kid. So I'm up at the top, and then underneath that, there are 2, 3, 4, 5 people who are also distributors. So now I'll make money while they sell it. And then underneath them are 4 or 5 distributors, 4 or 5 multiplied tons and times. So the idea is there's this sort of a pyramid where I'm at the top and all the people underneath are buying, and I get a little check for every time they buy it. And that was the first time that the idea of passive income was introduced to me. Now that I'm a little older and wiser, I understand that isn't passive at all, because the presumption is if you get someone underneath you, once you get them underneath you and they call it a downline, they're going to keep buying and selling forever. But the truth is they're not, right? They might leave. They might bail out. They might decide to not get more people underneath them. So those people who are in that, they can make good money, but they are continually having to refresh and build that downline. It is not passive. It actually requires a lot of attention.
Interesting.
Got it?
Mm-hmm.
So before we move on to the next part of it, what questions do you have about passive income, or how to get it, or how it works?
I have a question.
Okay.
Who is a person that you think uses good, like, passive income?
That's a good question. What I'm thinking about is, do I actually want to name names? So we as a family know someone. I can mention his name later, but in addition to the income that he has where he helps people, he's got a few things going on. Number one, he's got agreements with businesses that he consults where he makes a % of income based on the growth that they've received from his consulting. So let's say that they're at $1 million right now in revenue, which isn't very big for a business, by the way. So they make $1 million. They hire him to consult, and they grow to $2 million. He makes a % on the increase that they make, and he gets paid from that. That's not 100% passive income because it requires him to consult, but he is still making more money because everybody else is doing work. He also invests in real estate, and he has a number of apartments that people rent out, and he gets paid income from their rent. And on top of that, the thing with real estate too that's great is he still owns the property. So if he decides, I don't want to get this rent anymore, he just sells the property, and now he gets a huge chunk of cash coming in from it.
Interesting.
Any other questions?
Okay. My question is writing a book passive income?
That's a great question. And the answer really is, it depends.
It depends.
Okay. The first thing I would say is, if it's writing a business book, business principles, like the kind of books that I've written,
Right.
The answer is probably not.
Oh, really? I was expecting the opposite.
Right. And I will tell you that I have made far more royalties from other sources than I have from my actual books. Because business books themselves, the volume at which you sell them is not particularly high. I do have some friends who make good money in it, but even then, the good money isn't as much as you might think. So what the book has done in a business context has opened up the doors for me to do other things, some of which provide royalties. Some of it is for me going to speak, that sort of thing.
Okay.
For fiction,
Right.
the volume at which you can sell those, people buy 10 to 50 times more books from a fiction book than they would a business book.
It's a broader audience, right?
Right. And more passionate and more interested. And people just tend to read fiction more than they read nonfiction.
Right.
So if you hit it, for instance, like I know everyone here is a fan of Brandon Sanderson. Right. So he is making a lot of passive income. I ran into Brandon Sanderson. Did I tell you this? I talked to him.
Yeah, on a plane, right?
Yeah, I talked to him on a plane, and I was like, oh man, you sell a whole lot more books than I do. And he said, yeah, but you get paid a whole lot more for speeches than I do.
That's true.
Right? So he has to go places, he has to speak, he has to make these appearances, which again, is it truly passive income or is it low maintenance? Right? So he's got to go out, he's got to do the press, all that kind of stuff. He shows up, he shakes people's hands, he autographs their book, whatever it is. He gets paid nothing for that.
Right.
But it contributes to his ongoing sales.
Interesting.
I go speak, I get a really nice check, and I come home.
Right.
So it's just a different
It's very
dynamic.
different.
So it's not a question of how many royalties, the difference between them, but how much maintenance.
Interesting.
But I still would suggest that if you're really, really successful as a fiction writer, the maintenance is lower.
But there's always going to be some.
Right. And how prolific do you have to be to get those royalties to add up?
Right.
And that's part of passive income as well, is typically it requires a lot of upfront work that isn't paid. So, I mean, the really high paid fiction authors are writing a lot of books. Everybody likes to talk about J.K. Rowling, but she's an anomaly.
She's the 1% of the 1%.
Right. That doesn't happen. Typically, the authors that make a lot of money have written 15, 20, 30 books. And the cumulative amount of the royalties that come in, that starts to matter.
And I'm assuming that transfers over to music too, right?
Unless your name is Taylor Swift.
Unless your name is Taylor Swift.
Right? Or whoever it is, right? Because she can write a song, it's in the album, she gets credit for it. Heck, she gets credit if someone else wrote the song. Typically, they negotiate and say, all right, I'm going to sing your song, but I get a partial credit for it. So now they get a third of the royalties or whatever, to half the royalties that the person who wrote the song get. It's still worth it.
Right.
Because it's Taylor Swift. right. And so, tens of millions of copies. But that's how that game works. For most other songwriters, like let's take the example of Mel Torme, which is the most extreme. But you've got tons of songwriters in the middle who have written a lot of songs that you've heard on the radio and you like, but you don't even know that person's name, but they're getting nice royalties because they've got 10, 20, 30 songs that are out there generating royalties.
Gotcha.
So again, it's a question of maintenance. It's a question of how much risk you're willing to take up front to get that income. Okay, so briefly, I want to talk about the principle that, like I said, I haven't heard it worded this way, but I really want you to understand it, which is the concept of passive expenses. And passive expenses can eat you up financially. If you're not aware of them, if you don't stay on top of them, they can really do negative things. So a passive expense is an expense that happens on a regular basis and you're not thinking about it. It just happens in the background and it's costing you money. What's an example of a passive expense? Let's say something that's a monthly thing that you're paying over and over, that you might pay over and over. I know Darcy doesn't deal with this. Ella doesn't. I think you've had some passive expenses, Stratton. Right?
I still do have some with some subscriptions I have.
Yeah.
But yeah.
To a video service.
Yeah.
Right?
Streaming service.
You're doing Crunchyroll.
Crunchyroll, right? Yeah.
Okay. So how much is Crunchyroll?
Let's just say $8.
Okay. For those of you who are not familiar with it, my kids are really into Japanese animation. Crunchyroll is a good source for that. Lots and lots of different shows that you can watch. So you're paying $8 a month.
Yeah.
$8 a month doesn't sound like very much, right?
Mm-hmm.
But let's multiply that by 12. What's 12 times 8?
96?
Yeah, that's
96.
Why
So
did
that's
you say question mark?
Yeah, so that's $96 per year. Now, let's say that you keep that going, or even worse, you forget about it for a while, and you do it for 5 years. Now, how much have we spent on it?
A lot of
Close
money.
to 500.
Yeah, a little less than 500, right? And that just adds up over time. And it's really a problem, particularly in our current world, how easy it is to set up a subscription and then forget it.
Right.
And people tend to, especially when they struggle with money, tend to look only at the monthly expense. They go, I'm making this money in active income, and I can afford this much out passive expense. And they're just fighting each other constantly.
Right.
They're having to give attention to something that requires no attention, that's taking money out over and over and over again. Another big one that people will do that is, let's say, a car, right? And a car, there are two passive expenses that are going on here. One is the monthly payment that you have for it, or even if you're leasing it, the monthly rent that you're paying for it. Let's say it's, I don't know, $200, okay? $200 a month for a cheap car, and that's a cheap car. Mm-hmm. Then on top of that, you're paying interest. So we talked about passive income that was interest before. Mm-hmm. Now we've got passive expense that is interest. Now you're paying the interest to someone else. There's an old saying, those who understand interest earn it. Those who don't understand it pay it. So that car that you bought, let's say it's a $40,000 car, that's a decent car, might cost you in the end as much as $50,000 or 60,000 depending on the interest rate.
Right.
So now you just paid for that car 50% more than you would have if you had gone in and just paid cash up front.
Mortgage for a house too, right?
A mortgage is even worse.
I bet.
Because now you're talking 30 years of interest, which typically, depending on if it's not a favorable interest rate, you're going to pay for that house twice.
Eh,
You want to pay twice
No.
for your house?
no.
Probably not.
So when you start taking on these expenses and you hear monthly payment, a red flag should go up in your head. And you should say, this is a passive expense. Now, I'm not saying that they're all bad. We subscribe to streaming services. We subscribe to Netflix and that kind of thing. But we're doing it in a way where we are trying to be conscious. Like mom gets a credit card statement. We have one particular credit card that we use for passive expenses. And so she looks at it and she remembers, okay, yeah, we're paying for this, we're paying for this, paying for this. And we reconsider it on a regular basis.
Right.
So you don't want to let those passive expenses sneak by you every single month. And the next thing you know, you paid $500 for a streaming service that you haven't been using for 3 to 4 years.
Right.
Questions about passive expenses.
With that in mind, I just realized I have a subscription to a video game that I haven't played in like months.
Yeah.
And I keep seeing the email, oh, it's been charged. I'm like, oh, I'll play it. And I never get around to playing
Yeah.
it. So
And that's on like Google Play.
yeah, it's
right?
Google Play.
You just add it in. Oh, it's on your account. Don't have to think about it. It's
Right.
only $3 a month. And next
Right.
thing you know, you're spending $40, $50.
I mean, that's like $66 for a game I don't play.
Right.
Yeah.
And compare that to, let's say, like a great game that just came out, like a AAA title, you pay $60 for it, you're done.
Right.
But now
Never
you're
pay
having
it
to pay.
again.
So these little tiny games that are on your phone are huge drains because they are passive expenses that you forget about.
It's true.
So, like, I know you've given examples on how we've had passive expenses and passive income, but is there a certain way that you can accidentally use both at the same time? Like sometimes you're paying for something, and then you keep on paying for that thing, but and you're also earning things. Like, how do you level that out? Like, because when we went to the arcade, you were like, well, you're paying this much, and you're using like points you get to do that. Like, you're paying an unfair amount for something that you're earning. Does that kind of connect to?
Well, I'm going to answer the question that came to mind that you didn't ask, but this brought a great principle to mind, which is you can build businesses based on passive expenses for someone else. And that sounds like that's a negative thing. Yet, again, there are valid reasons why we would use a business on passive expenses that create passive income for us. So in the example of going to the arcade, whoever owns that bowling alley / arcade, that person is making passive income because people come in, their employees take care of them, all that kind of stuff. So you can use those passive expenses to your advantage if you build a business that has people paying passively to you. I'll give you another example. We have a heating and air conditioning company that comes out far more than we would like them to because of how our house was built. Okay. And so we were paying them a certain amount every time that they came out. And they said, we're offering a service for you for an X amount monthly fee where we will provide these services for free and we will give you a discounted rate. So they built a business that had a passive expense option for us that conceivably saves money over time. Now, I am willing to bet in our case that we have come out in favor there. But be careful when a large company offers you something like that. For example, when you buy a car, they're going to come to you and they're going to say, you should get insurance. You should get extended insurance on your car. And they're going to say, this is how much. Those companies have mathematicians. They're called actuaries. And those mathematicians sit down and they look at all of the probabilities and all the statistics, and they come up with a number that they know they're going to make out money from. They know that they're going to beat you because they know the statistics behind it.
Right.
So I would be really cautious in taking that from a large company. From a smaller company, it might actually be favorable for you. But also, if you have a small business, it might be favorable for you to offer something like that because now they have monthly recurring revenue that comes in because people are subscribed, and I'm putting subscribed, they're subscribed to their service. So you can use passive expenses to your advantage.
So how would you know if like that option is favorable for you? How would you figure that out?
Math. You know how
No.
you sit in class and you go, why are we learning this math? What's the point of
Because
it?
it's
the reason why.
stupid.
No, it's not stupid. No, we're just giving an example of why it's smart, right? Right? I mean, there's math that applies to engineering and science and rocketry and all that kind of stuff. But there's also math that applies to money,
Right.
and statistics and being an actuary. So if I had a small business, I would sit down and I would make educated guesses. I would look at past clients and I would say, how many times have we had to go into this customer, our top 20 to 30 customers, how many times have we gone in there? How much have they paid us? How much would we have made if we were giving them a monthly subscription? And I would just start crunching numbers. So you may not have the highest level math skills, but you can still make some pretty educated guesses about what monthly subscription is going to make you money.
You're hurting my brain.
Like I said, some of this conversation is hopefully going to linger in your head and it will be there. And then once you start seeing those expenses come in, or you start working in a job and you're like, I just put in an hour and I got X amount back and I put in an hour, and you're going to start thinking, how can I get out of this cycle? Because trading time for money, active income, is not a long-term pathway to financial success. If you want to have a job like that, and you also have to consider, how do I add some passive income into this?
On the side.
Exactly. How am I going to invest? How am I going to make interest? How am I going to invest in real estate? Where am I going to take this money that I'm getting and reinvest it? All right. Well, this has been a fun discussion. And those who are listening, I always like to encourage you and my kids to come up with one thing, one action that you can take from this discussion to make it a part of your life, something you can do this week. So, putting my kids on the spot, and we said it can't be writing related this time.
Yeah.
Every time we do it,
Yeah.
it's writing
Dang
it.
related. So, I want you to come up with an action. Doesn't have to be big, can be really small, that you're going to take related to either passive expenses or passive income.
I'll go first.
Okay.
Going back to what I said before, I want to check all of the subscriptions I have to see if what I have is worth the money I'm spending, and cancel the ones I have and keep the ones that I want to keep. Because I'm worried that there might be some things in the background now that I'm not thinking about that might be draining money. So I want to check.
Slowly siphoning money
Right.
out of your bank account,
Right.
and you don't even realize it.
Maybe
Right?
that's why
Feeding
Ella
on
has
my
more
lifeline.
than-
Yes, exactly. They're taking advantage of the hard work that you're putting in doing other things.
Mhm.
All right, great. I like it. You're going to examine your subscriptions. What's something you're going to do, Ella?
Well, I could probably just kind of look up stuff, figure out ways I could potentially do that later when it is something I should do to create passive income.
Yeah. And one of the questions you might want to ask yourself is, what sort of things fit your personality and fit your way of doing things? Not every option is the right option. So as you're looking at them, ask yourself, is real estate something I want to be a part of? Right? Would I rather be focusing on royalties? Would I rather be focusing on just making good investments and getting money back from that? Great. Darcy, do you have anything that came to mind?
No.
Okay, I'll help you out. So right now, you have these jars that we have set up, right, where you save your money. You put them into different categories, right? Have we not started that with you?
I have done it, but like
We moved
mom,
most of it to bank accounts.
yeah, mom never does that with me anymore, so I don't.
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the things that you could do, though, is look at the account. ask mom, hey, I'd like to look at my account and I'd like to see how much interest I earned. So what she can do is she can go in and the bank will show you how many times they gave you a little extra money. And my guess is over the last year or so, you might have earned, I don't know, $4 or $5, $10, but you can look at that and you can say, look at that. I earned passive income because I had money in the bank. And I think that would be really educational. And you can see passive income in action, right?
I think I'd want to do that too.
Yeah. Yeah. Just go take a look at it. And it shows you, like, every once in a while, I'll jump in my account and I'm like, all right, there was, $50 this month that I got that I didn't realize I had, or whatever the number was. But that also, it's kind of exciting to see that, right? Like, oh, it wasn't much, but here's money that came to me without having to do anything. And it also kind of opens your mind to say, what if I made different investments? What if instead of just having money in the checking account, I had money in stocks or I had money in bonds and I had income coming back from that? All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for this discussion. I hope it was useful. I hope that in the future, 10, 20 years from now, you're going to remember this and you're going to look at your money and you're going to handle things differently than you would have without having this discussion. So everybody say goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
And thank you, everyone, for listening. Remember, do something this week about what you learned. It's not just about the knowledge. It's about the action you take on that knowledge. Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to the Dave Crenshaw Success Project, hosted by my dad, Dave Crenshaw, and produced by Invaluable Incorporated. Research and assistant production by Victoria Bedez. Sound editing by Mark Lammerjazy. Voiceover by me, Darcy Crenshaw. And the music is by Ryan Brady via Pond 5 Licensing. Please subscribe to the Dave Crenshaw Success Project on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you like to get your podcasts. If you have a suggestion for someone my dad might like to interview, please send it to guest@davecrenshaw.com. And please don't forget to leave us a 5-star review. See you next time.